Hi, I'm Yulia, and this is Burning Questions. The topic that set the internet on fire this week is what happened in Romanian presidential election. And today we're going to be answering that question with our guest.
Well, my name is Julian Kifu. I'm a professor at the National University for Administrative Studies and National Defense University. I'm the president of the Conflict Prevention and Early Warning Center and former security advisor of the president, former state counselor of the prime minister, the same fields, foreign affairs, security, and defense.
Amazing. Well, today we're going to be talking about, how the world was taken by surprise, I guess, by the actions of Romania in your presidential election. I will ask you to walk our audience a little bit through what happened because, of course, I can do it in a summary, but I think it would be much better coming from you because a lot of the people in the world are confused. But Romania threw out the results of the presidential election of the first round because there was a pro-Russian candidate and there was foreign interference. And that's something that I think sets a very, very big precedent for the rest of the world because we're seeing a lot of foreign interference, specifically from Russia, happening not just in Romania, but in a lot of Western Europe and in a lot of the Western world in general. However, I think Romania is the only country that had enough alarm to actually take it to the Constitutional Court and actually do something about it because, as we're seeing in other countries, they just deal with it. So why don't we start with what
Okay.
happened with the presidential election in Romania?
So we had presidential elections, and as a sudden, we had a candidate claiming that he spent zero lei or euros, who arrived in 11 days from 2% estimated maximum to 23% in the first for the second round, moving into the second round. And it has been proved that the integrity of the elections have been at stake, and that's how the Constitutional Court decided the annulment of those elections. Behind this, we had the Supreme Council of Defense of the country meeting, which puts on the table from our intelligence services the infos related to how this could happen. Go imagine that you have somebody coming from nowhere and overnight, not being known, no transparency, no money, no advertising, no nothing. And as a sudden, it appears to be the front runner in the presidential elections. So behind all of this, it has been proved that Russia has been pumped up the visibility of the guy, has reached number of new voters, meaning not only youngsters, but voters that never voted, Cambridge Analytica plus type, and without any respect for the rules, introduced that guerrilla, taking over of the presidential office in Romania, a country that is fundamentally anti-Russian. Even the fact that we counted the number of invasions of the Russians show us the deep, feelings inside the society related not to Russia or the Russians, but to Putin's Russia and to imperialistic Russia. So in those situations, having in hands the proofs, having in hands that irregularities which are completely disrupting the integrity of the electoral process, Constitutional Court moved to annul the elections. At the same time, because after the first round, the person who was running was exposed, we had a mixed, mystical, far right extremist, pro-Russian, who attempted to become president in Romania. So in those conditions, we decided. So the Constitutional Court decided to annul the elections and to do everything in order to come back to square one. Meanwhile, we had general elections. Civil society proved their resilience, democratic resilience, and reacted to the guy. So first, it was the exposure of what this guy was claiming. So actually, we had all the conspiracy theories, all the, I don't know, whatever bullshits anti-scientific you can imagine, from anti-vax to uh, the world is flat, And at the end of the day, this guy who has as background agriculture, he's a pedolog, claiming that he has skills in international relations, he's the best negotiator, he knows chemistry, he knows I don't know, medicine, so on and so forth. He has been exposed, and that moved voters in Romania to vote 65% for the pro-European parties, and for sure to isolate the nationalistic or so-called sovereignistic parties here in Romania.
And he's not allowed to run again, right? As in, he cannot.
No, there's no such a decision, and it can't be taken according to the rule of law, and that was one of the principles that has been used by Russia to take advantage on it. According to the law, for putting somebody out of the race, you need to have a final decision of a court. We are not there. There are a number of inquiries. There is a number of extreme right persons with violent speech, with hate speech, with violent activities. They have been catch on their way to press, trying to do some stuff, and so on and so forth. So all of this with the financial background and the inquiries about how he arrived to do a number of electoral payment, even though he declared zero as expenses. All of these are taking time. You need to put proofs together, you need to go to court, you need to have a final decision, and only then evict him. And we don't want to evict him. He needs to be beaten in the vote, not to be evicted from the elections, because that could create, a type of myth,
A
a
martyr.
type of victim, and so on and so forth. No, no, he should be beaten in elections. He has been exposed. Everybody knows who he is. He was near being, if we would have had the second round, it would have been possible for him not to be president, in spite of the poor level of the other candidate. But even in those conditions, we couldn't accept to have at least a perception that, I don't know, 35, 40% of the population of Romania are pro-Russian by supporting this guy, because he made it through fraud in the second round. So it was a wise decision of the Constitutional Court, by the way, taken 9-0 by the judges. So it's not a split decision. It's not disputable, in any kind. And that really prompted it. And we blocked this blitzkrieg, who was supposed to take over the presidency like overnight. So in 2 weeks' time, you don't have the rule of law and the legal system, and anything does not have time to react and to prove the guy of being guilty. Even if he is guilty and you are, for instance, propose a measure like arrest, he can be elected even being in jail. So it's not any
Yeah.
blockage into this, and that's why we need, and we learned the hard way that democracy also needs some breaks, moments where it can hit the brake and realize where it is, where it comes from. And if it happens to Romania, it was a test case. Maybe it was a payback for the support of Republic of Moldova and for the fact that Russia did not succeed in Republic of Moldova, neither putting down the referendum, pro-European referendum, neither to have in the second round of elections, Sandu won with 10.5% of the vote plus its counter candidate. So it was also a payback. But if it happens, if it is a test, it can be replied everywhere, and it's a matter of lessons learned for everybody to realize how it has been done, how this can be maneuvered. Let's take it was TikTok, who does not observe the rules of the game, being warned by our electoral authority that a number of the wrongdoings of the guy, they didn't put down, the advertisers who were not under the rules, marked as advertorial, mark that he is a candidate in presidential elections or anything else. So actually, it wasn't a level playing field. He, the other candidate has been put down because of that candidacy, because of the notes on their, including on TikTok, and it wasn't a fair elections. And this comes on top with some other wrongdoings that TikTok, the Chinese disclosure of the algorithm and Russia's interference, especially GRU, have a special unit into that, who intervene. And by the way, sanctions by the European Union meanwhile.
Yeah, well, Russia really needs more countries on their side in the EU, right? And I think that they're banking on approaching and meddling with countries that were previously in the Russian satellite influence, right? So the reason why they go after Hungary, Moldova, and Romania is because those are countries that Russia, I guess, knows a little better than they would, for instance, like France or Germany or Italy or something, even though they put their hand there as well, which is why I think it was so surprising for the world that out of all of the countries, right? Because we consider Western European democracies to be like the beacon of democracy. And then the Eastern European democracies, everybody kind of looks down on us because we're sort of like less experienced, right? And there is this kind of like elitism thing going on in the world where Western Europe is Europe and Eastern Europe is like we are becoming Europe, you know? We're separating from like our Soviet influence or something like that, and we're becoming Europe. And so I think it took the world by surprise that actually Romania, which is largely considered to be Eastern Europe, right, and just an evolving democracy, is the country that actually took a very large stance because when these things happen in Western European countries, the results just get accepted. You know, we saw that in the Netherlands, like obviously he wasn't able to form the government, but we saw that he won. And there was a lot of Russian interference with the election. I also, from myself, will say, you know, what's happening in the US today, it's if you look down the ticket, everybody is voting for pro-democratic values. And then if you look at the president, it's a guy who represents a completely different picture. And there is very evidently a lot of Russian interference. But of course, in these countries, because there is this idea of democracy, well, the people chose and we don't want to make it look like we're seizing power, we're not going to do anything about it, right? So what Romania did is a stark example. And I think that a lot of more established, quote unquote, Western European, Western democracies should follow suit because there's clearly a lot of Russian meddling going on around the world, and very few countries are actually taking it at face value and doing something drastic about it. I think to me, what Romania did is not necessarily a surprise because one of the reasons why I think these Western European democracies are so easy on sort of accepting, you know, foreign meddled elections and stuff is because they rely very heavily on checks and balances because they've never been under a dictatorship. So they don't understand what it's like to be under a dictatorship. So they think that even if someone terrible takes over power because, I don't know, Russia helped boost their presence or something, it's, you know, the courts and the parliament and everything, they're going to even it out and the person is not going to be able to do a lot of damage. But what they don't understand is that it's not how a dictatorship works because you have the courts and the checks and balances today. This person comes to power and you have none of that tomorrow. And I think Romania has, you know, a history obviously with Ceausescu and something that that you wouldn't allow to repeat. Do you agree that one of the reasons why Western European countries are not dealing with this Russian meddling as swiftly as per se Romania is or other Eastern European countries are trying to because they have never been in the situation in which we have been? Do you think that plays a part?
There are different experiences, that for sure, but I consider Romania as being a well-established democracy, and the proof was that the resilience of the
Mm-hmm.
democracy and of the democracy in our societies had lead to the blockage of this, fall towards kind of dictatorship. The guy
Mm-hmm.
wanted, he's a populist and he doesn't need parties, he doesn't need institution,
Mm-hmm.
he will govern with the people. You might realize
Mm-hmm.
where it comes from. We've seen this in fascia di combattimenti, the
Mm-hmm.
fascism of Mussolini, and in Hitler's case and in some other
Mm-hmm.
cases. So we are not going that way. So I will somehow nuance this about democracy, where it's good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
Why Russia has been melting in Hungary, first and foremost, and then in Slovakia in some points where they have some points of support. They are supporting everywhere the extreme right, extreme left, extreme conservatists, populists everywhere. But when such a person arrive in the forefront, they are trying to use it. By the way, Viktor Orban had a very, I would say, unexpected reactions when he saw that. He was somehow afraid of what's happening in Romania, what could happen even
Mm-hmm.
in his own case. It's not that way. All of these are still democracies, and they are part of the European Union, and they are partners and loyal allies, even though they have different approaches. But there are ways of dealing with both of them as it happens. Don't forget that we had the 15th, sanctioning package,
Mm-hmm.
and everything has passed with the votes of all the countries. We have the final declaration of NATO,
Mm-hmm.
including the full package related to Ukraine, and it happens with the votes of all those countries. So things are far more nuanced. I won't go that way. In the case of Romania, we are old rivals, if not enemy
Mm-hmm.
of Russia in history. There are, which doesn't mean that it will stay that way, because we also have been at odds with Turkey, which is now
Mm-hmm.
our strategic partner. We have excellent relations, and in some other cases as well. So it's not a matter of history, but it also counts. It counts the way that Russia has been treating the region. And don't forget,
Mm-hmm.
Romania is still a Latin country, and this helps a lot. It is deeply rooted, the feeling that we are different, that we belong to the West, to
Mm-hmm.
Europe. We are strategic partners with the Americans. I think that that was actually what made the choice possible. That fact, we will hit one of the two pillars of the eastern flank, us and Poland. So
Mm-hmm.
they attempted to do that in Romania. Democracy is working and checks and balances even in Romania, accepting that we would have had such a president. There are numerous means to deal with him, to constrain, to contain, to suspend if
Mm-hmm.
he's doing anything that goes against the policies of the country. If you do have the parliament and the government, actually the president, you can play all around if he's messing with the institutions, with democracy, with the constitution, and everything else. But why arriving to that when you have all the instruments to do it the right way? And when actually in Romania, maybe you have 5, 7% of the population, maybe not as much, who are somehow considering that Russia is good, could be a model, could be a partner, we should get along with Russia, and so on and so forth. So you can't move these 2, 3, 5, 7%, which is, by the way, healthy in any democracy to have also the other side
Mm-hmm.
represented and or in any debate. It's a difference from moving to those 2, 3, 5, 7% to, I know, 40, or to the presidency taking over by. But it was, once again, an attempt that has been blocked. Fortunately, we will have the parliament swearing in by the end of this week, on Friday. We
Mm-hmm.
will have a government by the end of this year. There is a possibility even the next days, Monday, Tuesday, if not between Christmas and the New Year's Eve. And after those are in place, the new government, I mean, will establish the agenda for the elections.
Mm-hmm.
According to the law, we need something like 90 days in front to be announced the next elections. And I suppose that if not the first meeting of the government, the second one will deal with the agenda of the presidential elections, because we need also to have the president in place
Mm-hmm.
and move on. When you have the power established and put in good position, okay, you can deal with everything else, including with wrongdoings, with mistreat of the law, with the interference of foreign powers into your elections, with what prompted this breach of the integrity of your election, so on and so forth. And those files are going to reach their end because you need time once again to do all
Mm-hmm.
the research and to come with the proofs and to audit everybody, to hear everybody, and to so on and so
Yeah.
forth. So it will happen, but in time, in a due and legal and legitimate time.
Understandable. Was have you noticed Russia's interference in Romania's political scene before, or has it intensified with the full-scale invasion of Ukraine?
No, the interference is constant. We
Mm-hmm.
have been noticed 15 years ago. I have wrote a book with one of my
Mm-hmm.
friends in Republic of Moldova about the typization of the information warfare in Russia.
Mm-hmm.
Interferences were aiming at promoting some of their proxies
Mm-hmm.
or representatives or people who were generally believing in some of the issues that were going with the interests of Russia.
Mm-hmm.
That was one point. At the other point, they attempted to make the system for having under control number of citizens who could vote that could decide in between the two leading figures, presidential candidates. So to decide in between two candidates that would arrive in the second round. But it's the first time when it happened and at the world level when they are promoting one candidate from nothing to being in the first in the second round, and attempted to make him president. And it is done in a very specific way. Actually, the basics is to find the voters who believe that candidate, who are for sure
Mm-hmm.
frustrated, critical, they are putting question marks on every democratic leadership that has happened in Romania. And the problem is genuine. Actually, in any democracy, we do have a number of people who disagree with one decision or another
Yeah.
of a government. The problem, when you get all those people together, when and it was so actually they were aiming at discovering the suitable people that could be put in different groups,
Mm-hmm.
each with each an interest or each grievance and each frustration and so on. After that, they have done a process of dependency on the group, on the discussions there, then a type of coercive conditioning them
Mm-hmm.
to act through those groups, and it was something close to what's happened in any sect, in any I don't know cult, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, the third level was radicalization, and with radicalization it was similar to what happened with, for instance, radical suicide bombers. So they've built up a group of a certain weight of people who are completely following the leader. They didn't knew,
Mm-hmm.
it never appears, but they knew the name. And after having this very important group of people, well, thousands,
Mm-hmm.
tens of thousands maybe, who are completely dependent on the leader, they moved to hyper promoting guerrilla marketing,
Mm-hmm.
the name. So people voted in protest, vote for sure, without knowing the guy, without knowing what he stands for. When it was exposed, huge number of the guys who voted for him retreated. Huge number of voters were paid,
Mm-hmm.
who were influencers were paid to reach people.
Mm-hmm.
They had paid some hundred, the first 100 with 8.5 million people reached. Um, Half of them retreated.
Mm-hmm.
They raise everything that they have advertised when they realize who's the guy, what he stands for, what were uh, their positions, so on and so forth. So that was the way of dealing with it. So it's an old type of mixture inside
Mm-hmm.
elections. It happens for each of the country. I can tell you that up to the moment when everything shifted to that guerrilla attack, blitzkrieg attack, there were genuine groups without any type of, cats and dogs,
Mm-hmm.
how to feed your pet, or I know, transportation of
Mm-hmm.
the goods or everything that you can imagine, cooking. And overnight, all those groups shifted in supporting Georgescu. They put their
Mm-hmm.
names and they try to get with everybody from different interests into that once again. So it can happen.
What do you think
It can happen to us.
What do you think the goal would be for Russia in? Well, actually, let me hold the thought here for a second. I'm very happy that you mentioned that there are lots of online communities that talk about random stuff like cats, dogs, healthy meals and stuff that are actually specifically accounts made in advance. They receive following for something absolutely unrelated, and then they start promoting a particular political candidate. That's one of Russia's strategies, actually, in acquiring voters for their proxies, because it's hard to sort of get people's attention by promoting a political candidate out of nowhere. But it's easy to get people's attention if they already follow you and like you and trust you, and they already have been watching their daily smoothie recipes from you. So that's a very good point that you mentioned.
Yeah, and the guy is linked to this. He's
Yeah.
cooking that and his favorite meal. He also have a cat which is red and he's doing whatever.
Yeah.
That was the why of introducing it. A lot of psychological operations into all of
Yeah.
this. The GRU unit
Yeah.
who's dealing with that, it's in the forefront, is really skillful. They
It is
succeed
very
in doing that.
skillful.
They because it's easier. There we have a big diaspora, blue collars,
Mm-hmm.
who by coming home from work, they need to be in contact and they just contact it
Yeah.
by looking at TikTok.
Yeah.
It's easy, superficial, it's the general stuff. It's not going to read something
Yeah.
or following a news program or you name it. So
Yeah.
everything, they also take good use on the social media types who, especially that one, does not respect the rules of the law, and on another, the rules of the European Union, the engagements of the other social media, and also is not respecting anything that somebody was taking. They also distributed their skills. So Russians can realize and identify individuals that fit into their groups. Then they attracted it and they move it. Everything has been planned on Telegram, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, it has happened. I'm just quoting from the reports that were declassified and
Yeah.
are in the open by our intelligence services. For sure, those are not proofs. So
Mm-hmm.
prosecutors need to go for proofs to hearing persons involved
Mm-hmm.
and to produce is needed in order to go on court.
What do you, so for those, for our viewers who might not be aware, what do you think Russia's main goal was with installing their guy in the Romanian government? How did they want to use it to influence particularly what? Like what types of things did they want to influence with that in the world?
Well, actually, it depends on the position of those guys. In the case of the president of Romania, he is responsible for foreign policy, defense, and security. Go figure out.
Mm.
No more, no less. Okay, he can't do anything by its own.
Mm-hmm.
He has a parliament who has an equal legitimacy with him, has a government who has
Mm-hmm.
to apply, so he can't do anything. The institutions that he can use, the Supreme Council for Defense of the
Mm-hmm.
country, the one that has been reunited and so
Mm-hmm.
on, is functioning on a basis of agreement of all the members. And you might
Mm-hmm.
figure out there are 12 members, half of them coming from the government,
Mm-hmm.
half of them being appointed by or proposed by the president, but appointed by the government, the chief of
Mm-hmm.
intelligence services, so on and so forth. So it's not easy. A president can't do anything
Mm-hmm.
that he and not against the parliament, against everybody. I'm not talking here about the population, civil society reactions, and everything else. So balances are functioning, but actually, those were the aims, at least to promote a kind of blockage, because the
Mm-hmm.
president has responsibilities related to signing the appointment of generals, ambassadors, general
Mm-hmm.
prosecutors, so it has number of responsibilities. True on another point that, according to the Constitutional Court, he is allowed to reply to resend only once a nomination that he doesn't agree on. Then, if he doesn't sign, there is the possibility of suspending him, which means that the president of Senate took over and is doing the things, appointing everybody and signing what is needs to be signed, laws and everything else. In the second round, we have the impeachment based on high treason. If, for instance, the guy would have liked to go to see Putin or says, I don't know what about the foreign policy, he can be anytime completely deposed by two-thirds of the parliament. By the way, we have the two-thirds of the Democrats who could do that. But once again, these are procedures that take time. It exposes, and if we need to prepare for the war, for supporting Ukraine, for everything else. We don't need those blockages. It's also going against the reputation of the country and so on and so forth. So we are considering ourselves a mature democracy and with a civil society that reacted, and that's where it leads, that reaction. It put the guy in his place. He's going to rerun that once being exposed, being transparent. Everybody knows who he is, what he stands for. He will need to expose his finances and who's paying for that. So no longer Geru amplifying. He was the ninth growth of that portrait that he has, his image, in the world. So in 10 days, he was the ninth most important growth in image
That's
as a
crazy.
growth. So you can't imagine that that can be done with zero money.
No, of
And when
course.
the GRU is doing that and Russia is doing that, you have to have at least a question mark.
Of course. I mean, they're not doing it out of goodness of their heart to help somebody. Also, it's an operation that's obviously prepared well in advance, and there is a lot of very bright
There is a
minds that,
question mark.
yeah.
Yeah, there is a question mark which hasn't been established yet by our authorities. Okay, they need time. Is if he was genuinely pro-Russian, he had contacts, and there were a number of conservatives who
Yeah.
appeared around him. If he is a genuine himself linked to the conspiracy, or he was picked in a number of candidates without any chance because of his genuine positions, his natural
Yeah.
position, and put up so a useful idiot,
Yeah.
to be used by.
Yeah.
So he wasn't a part of the, but that would be proved in time.
Got it. What is the mood in Romania like? I want to shift the conversation a little bit because I think we've covered everything with the election. What is the general mood in Romania about Ukraine? Like, what does the civil society think about the war in Ukraine? Does the civil society see this as a Romanian problem as well, or is something looming, or is it just a localized war of Russia attacking Ukraine?
No, no, no. But you know already that Romania was in the first moment with Ukraine. Actually, I was then in office at the government, and I had to run the show the second time with Ukraine. I was presidential advisor with the first Ukrainian, the annexation of Crimea and the Russian attack eastern regions of Ukraine. And now I was state counselor of the prime minister doing Ukraine as well. So it was a full support for Ukraine still, and it comes at all level. As you have seen when we had the refugees, the first days, it wasn't the government
Yeah,
himself alone. They
it
need
was a
to,
lot of people. Yeah.
do some stuff before acting. But the civil society went along from the first moment and assisted the refugees coming over. So we had more than 7 million of them, for sure. The biggest part just traveling through our countries. It's not, we had just, I don't know,
Yeah.
some 200,000 that was sitting here. But for everybody, you need to, host them, to feed them, to transport them, to
Yeah.
identify them. Some of them were coming from regions. They didn't have papers of any kind
Yeah.
or anything. With the embassy, with your authorities, we supported the Ukraine on all the accounts, as you well know. And I think that was natural. It came natural. We didn't need to do anything extra for that. Society came with us, citizens came with us, government was there
Mm-hmm.
for all the moments, and I didn't saw any moment where actually there were problems related to the fact that we were supporting Ukraine. And yes, it is felt as our war. We have to assist Ukraine with everything needed in order to keep the line of contracts and to defend themselves. Because, for instance, it is in our books, in our strategies, that any possibility of Russia to arrive near our borders is a
Mm-hmm.
threat to national security itself. So it goes completely smoothly, completely natural. It wasn't any real problem at any point.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have even the reactions that happened in some other countries related to the transfer of the goods, for instance, of cereals, of
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, agricultural products, and so on and so forth. So, because there were agreements, there were discussions, negotiations, bilateral, and we succeeded in putting in place everything on that. You might realize that we were in a position of having 7 times the level of transportation
Yeah.
in at our borders. We opened numerous new
Mm-hmm.
border passing. We also had to support Republic of Moldova, who didn't have the
Mm-hmm.
possibilities to support refugees as we were. In
Yeah.
some cases, we just transporting the refugees from their border with Ukraine
Yeah.
to our border to inside Romania to host them because it was cheaper than to,
Yeah.
do the whole thing and give money and humanitarian help in Republic of Moldova to do the thing. So in that direction, I think that we won a big since the time of Eharonov. I think it was your Minister of Defense and then Prime Minister who says that Romania is the first threat to the national security of Ukraine. So not Russia, but Romania.
Oh.
I was somehow very proud on those times, wow, if Romania is so big that Ukraine believes that is the most important threat, it means something.
Well, I mean, if
No,
it.
it was
Yeah.
the very clear divide et impera type of Russians approach,
Yeah. Of
trying to
course.
mess with themselves.
Of course.
And I'm very happy that actually I suppose that we rediscover each other as neighbors
Yeah.
in a different way. I think that even people who were in Romania as refugees or in any kind, or the ones that worked with Romanians for everything which happens in Ukraine, they now can testify a different type of,
Yeah.
Romania was usually into the media, into the perception of the
Yeah.
average Ukrainians.
It's actually interesting because, you know, the refugees traveling through Romania and settling in Romania actually does play into Russian interference as well. Because I don't know if you remember this, but I remember that in the beginning of the full-scale invasion, when a lot of Ukrainians were coming into Romania or going through Romania, there was a lot of propaganda both in Romania and in Ukraine. Where in Ukraine there would be things on being shown on TikTok of Romanians treating Ukrainian refugees really poorly, and then in Romania it was Ukrainians behaving really poorly. And there was this like very increased sort of presence of these videos that were trying to create a conflict between Romania and Ukraine. So I guess it answers my own question, but with Russian interference and whether
Yeah,
it was.
we have also to take in consideration the fact that Russia is taking on our own vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
It what happens with Romania because the support of the political class and the
Yeah.
is very low,
Yeah.
and it's a reality here in Romania. There's a lot of persons who are disagreeing with number of their behavior, and it
Yeah.
happens. The same way with a number of your citizens who came over with huge cars, with a lot of money,
Yeah.
spending and showing up, and so it was a little bit, confusing.
Yeah.
Refugees. You would imagine that refugees are people coming from war with poor situation that you need to
Yeah.
assist, that you need to. But in some cases, it was, a completely different, image
Yeah.
and way of behaving and so on and so. But biggest part of the Ukrainian refugees are here. We have more than, I think, 10,000 who are already
Yeah.
working in Romania, completely integrated. There are some groups of, because the biggest part, some
Yeah.
70% were women and children.
Yeah.
Part of the women who already have done kind of schools for learning Romanian.
Yeah.
They are learning and speaking Romania, so they begin to integrate themselves. We assisted the children to attend the
Yeah.
school in Ukraine by having tablets
Yeah.
and online access and everything. But it's very also very good that if some of them want to settle here,
Yeah.
they it's normal to learn Romanian and to be integrated in the Romanian school and
Yeah.
everything else. So, well,
Well, I did a lot of
we
work in
should see.
I actually did a lot of work in the beginning of the invasion, kind of explaining the situation of Ukrainian refugees showing up in expensive vehicles and with, Rimowa suitcases and stuff. Because I think you're right, is the idea of a refugee is usually worse happen in countries that are incredibly disadvantaged. So the people are running both from poverty and from war. And in Ukraine, people weren't running from poverty. People were running from missiles, and missiles, unfortunately, don't choose whether to strike a poor household or whether to strike a rich household. And I think in the beginning of this invasion, a lot of people, especially from like wealthy suburbs of Kyiv and wealthy suburbs of Dnipro and other cities, they were scared. They were scared that Russian army is going to come and take over everything they have. So they packed up whatever they had into whatever cars they had, and it had a lot of them happened to be luxury, and they left. And it was also a very big part of Russian propaganda and something that Russia was using in the countries in which Ukrainian refugees were coming to, sort of creating these contradicting narratives where they were saying, oh, these people are coming here and all of these expensive stuff and they're spending all of this money. You have to hate them. Look at how rich they are, and they're like, and they need help. But then the other narrative was they're taking government money and they're using your money and they're using your taxes. But these two narratives are not, they don't coincide, because if you have all of this money, first of all, no one's going to give you government assistance. Second of all, you're not going to go ask for government assistance because you clearly, you have enough of assets of your
The
own.
rules are the same. Doesn't matter if it's a refugee wealthy or not wealthy.
Yeah, for
So in the
sure.
case of Romania, but it's a different thing. It was a
Yeah.
speculation for sure,
Yeah.
and the problem, the real problem, I mean, for the people around was the behavior.
Yeah.
It wasn't the fact of refugee with money or without money that was secondary, or with a
Mm-hmm.
car or with another car or whatever, but it was the behavior. So there were some cases with bad behavior, but it's what happened in a big population.
Yeah.
It happens in our countries as well.
Of
You have
course.
people and people.
Yeah.
There are some have to
Yeah.
show up, to make noise, to
Yeah.
but
I
once
s-
again, it's normal. It's a percentage. It's not. It's an
yeah.
exception. It's not the rule.
Yeah.
It's not that we select who will enter Romania. The
Yeah.
wealthy in cars and not the others, or something like that. No.
Yeah. Though these
So
cases were
once
definitely
we have to
blown up.
accept
Yeah.
that's reality. That's democracy to be in disagreement with whoever, and it's also normal. But when somebody picks up on that,
Mm-hmm.
on on a deception, on a vulnerability, and
Mm-hmm.
amplifies it and uses it in political purposes, that's a different thing. That's informational warfare, and here
Yeah.
we need
Yeah.
to react
And Russia
and to
definitely is.
dismantle.
Russia is not as strong with its military as it is with its informational warfare, and unfortunately, no one is safe from it. And I really do think that Romania showed a very, very big example, and I think that it's a precedent like nothing else. And I really hope that other democracies take Romania as an example and really start paying closer attention to their elections. And if there is anything that looks off, I hope that it's investigated, and I hope that proper laws are being enforced, because so far in the past 2.5 years, there have been so much election meddling in various different European countries and Western countries in general, and I don't see anyone reacting as swiftly as Romania did. And I honestly, this is something that I want to say thank you to Romania too, because it's leading by example, you know? And it's a really big thing, and it's great to have, and it's great that it's happening at our border with our neighbor, you know, because it's we know that we're safe as well
Well,
with, you know, Romania paying so much
uh,
attention to.
we are not Afghanistan. We are
Yeah,
not going to praise the Taliban taking over of
yeah,
any kind of Taliban. And we
yeah,
are not also the US on the 6th of
good,
January having or allowing that type of incursion in the parliament or taking over by violence of anything. It won't happen in Romania. It's a serious state, as you have realized. On another point, yes, we have learned. We have learned, and we are trying to discuss this with our partners in the West
yeah,
numerous times. I was several occasions in that situation. So we know about the Gerasimov doctrine,
yeah,
and we know that this is built up based on the principles of value and values of democracy, which are considered to be vulnerabilities. Why? Because people are supporting them, are defending those values,
yeah,
and they have built up weapons to take advantage on those principles
yeah,
of and values. Free speech, free circulation of idea, right of gathering together, well, you name it.
yeah,
And it's what we have, including in challenging and altering our elections. It happens in the same way, using our very rules. So that's why I suppose that we need to have very clear reactions. I think that the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe
yeah,
asked the this commission to look into it and to decide when democracy can hit the brake,
yeah,
when a constitutional court can annul elections if they have seen meddling in the proofs, in what conditions. And I think that it's a good start. It's a good start for our democratic structures in times of social media, because we don't need to forget the technical way of reaching each and every of our citizens from everywhere in the world, missing
yeah,
with his mind, trying to knowing about that person
yeah.
through its activity, virtual world, and that's it. It leads to that.
Yeah, I really hope that Romania leads the conversation in this in Europe, and I really do hope that a lot of other countries take example from you. Well, thank you so much for taking your time today to clarify the political situation in Romania, and thank you to Romania for teaching us all a very important political lesson. So, thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much.
Well, I hope that this conversation has cleared a lot of things up for you. It certainly did clear a lot of things up for me, and it was very helpful. I do really hope that other countries follow suit and do the same thing as Romania did. You know probably more than I do that there is a lot of foreign interference happening around the world, and none of us are taking as swift of action as Romania was. If you enjoyed this conversation and would like to hear more conversations like it, please don't forget to follow this channel and also, of course, set on your notifications so you don't miss the next videos when they come out. And of course, give this video a like, send it to a friend, and leave a comment with your questions, suggestions, or anything that you would like to let out, because I read all of it and it helps me greatly to tailor next episodes to your liking. See you next time.